Welcome to Trashmagination, a podcast about reimagining trash. I'm Carla Brown. Today's topic is inspired by my friend Alexis Sullivan, who emailed me to say that her husband had just cleaned out his sock drawer and that he was looking for ideas of what to do with these old socks. Should she recycle them? How would she do that? And maybe she should just throw them out. And one idea that she had was perhaps that she would cut them up and put them out in the woods for animals to use as nesting material. So the purpose of today's podcast is to help you think about what to do with your old, unmatched, or worn out socks. So regarding this idea about the nesting material, I wasn't sure. So I did some research on gardening and bird watching forums. Folks raised concerns about cutting up things like socks, fabric of different types, and particularly cotton, because they felt that the cotton was actually not a very good insulator once it got wet. Now, wool would be, as you know, wool, even when it gets wet, it still does a good job keeping you warm. So I think if you have wool socks, I think that's totally fine. But I think socks that have cotton or other man-made materials might not be the best idea for nesting materials. If you are looking for creative reuse materials for that purpose, then most of these forums seem to recommend string or yarn or thread bits that are kind of short, like 3 or 4 inches long. There is a huge support for animal hair or human hair, dog hair. This apparently is a really good insulator and something that will draw the attention of the birds. Also straw or feathers or stuffing from old furniture. So this is what you might consider instead of old socks. One person talked about dryer lint. I know that's something people have suggested you put out for birds, but what this person said is unless most of your dryer lint is made from human and dog hair and cat hair, then actually it kind of just becomes like concrete when it gets wet. So it's not a very good nesting material. So if nesting material is not the best choice, what else can we do? So first, I think a good idea is to set up systems to reduce the number of unmatched socks, because you'll have perfectly good socks that you end up tossing because you just can't find the other one. Now, in our house, we have a pretty basic system. I have these 2 plastic milk jugs that I cut off the top, and one's for light color socks and one's for dark colored socks. And I just put unmatched socks in there. And then as I bring up a new load of laundry, I can connect them and they go off in their little pairs. Again, another idea I saw, and this was on Pinterest, was somebody took a piece of old, like barn board, old wood, and they had attached clothespins to it. And then they put a sign that said something like lost socks or please help me find my match or stuff like that. And they had hung that up in their laundry room. So that's another cute way to remind yourself that these socks are looking for their pair. That's good for reducing the number of unmatched socks. But what if you have a sock that is definitely, you're just never going to find its pair or the pair has worn out? So I put my ideas into 4 categories. One is to use them for cleaning, painting, and home care projects. The second is to use socks or cut up socks in situations where you need a strap or a band. The third idea is to make little things like smaller socks or mittens or little homeopathic hot pads. I'll talk about that in more detail, but basically make little things that help you stay warm. And then the fourth idea is about making toys. And there's like a million toy ideas. So let's talk through each of those categories. So the first one, which is cleaning, painting, and home care. So the classic idea I saw most commonly was that you can use socks for dusting. You can either slide them on your hand, and this is a good tip if you want to engage children in helping you with dusting. They can just tuck their hand into the sock. You can take those are sort of more fuzzy socks, and you can slide them onto the Swiffer device, and they can basically be a washable Swiffer pad. If you're doing painting projects, you can slide old socks over your shoes so that you don't get paint drips on your shoes. You can also put them on things that might get drips on them, like doorknobs. A fourth idea relates to filling a long sock with rice or buckwheat and then using that as a draft protector that you could put along the bottom of your windows or doors. So those are all our home care type of project ideas. The next one is using socks in situations where you would typically use a strap or a band. So on Pinterest, I saw people, like particularly who like to run or walk outside, and they would cut the toe off the sock and they would slide it up their arm and make it kind of like a little pocket or a band on their upper arm, and they could slide their phone or their little music device into that band on their arm. So this means you don't have to have pockets, you don't have to have a belt or something to attach the device to, and you don't have to carry it in your hand. I also saw, this is cool, if you have long hair, I have long hair, but I haven't tried this. They would roll the sock up into kind of like a donut shape, and then they would wrap their ponytail around it in a way so it makes a very satisfying kind of bun on the back of their head. So that was actually, there were a ton of videos about that. So if you're interested in giving your hair an appearance of being thicker, you might even match the sock color to the color of your hair. And then something that I do at our house is I will cut up the socks into circles and use them in situations where I might use a rubber band. For example, if I want to keep a box closed, I just have this circle of sock, and it works better than rubber bands because rubber bands will dry up and crack over time, but little sock circles will not. So the next category idea is how to use socks to make things that keep you warm or keep your family members warm. Well, first of all, if you have a baby or a toddler, you can actually take your adult size socks and you can sew them into smaller socks by just tracing the size of socks that you need. And I'll put a tutorial in the show notes. You can use socks to make fingerless gloves. I used to work in a building where the person who sat near the front door, she used to complain about her hands getting cold. She used to make fingerless gloves by cutting socks and putting them over her hands, so just her fingers were showing. And another use of socks is to make homeopathic hot pads that you fill with rice or buckwheat, and you can put those in the microwave. You could even add a few drops of essential oils to make a nice smell if you like that kind of thing. I did read that it's a good idea to put a cup of water in the microwave when you do that, because if you microwave that kind of thing for more than a few minutes, you can cause a fire. So good idea to add a cup of water. This is a kind of cute, crafty idea, but you could make tiny stockings out of old socks if they're nice, colorful socks. And I've even seen them hung up as kind of like a little advent calendar where you put little presents inside the socks. So finally, the most common use I saw for old socks are about making toys for kids and pets. And it's amazing the creativity of people with their socks. The classic idea that most people have heard of is a sock puppet or a sock monkey, and there's just tons of tutorials on how to make those. Sock monkeys are kind of back in these days. So I also saw that animals that are kind of popular right now, like sloths, I saw a lot of tutorials for a sock sloth, and it kind of hangs from its arms from a pole or something. That's very cute. I also saw beanbags, hobby horses, something called a socktopus, which is a no-sew toy where you stuff the end of the sock with something, a tennis ball or some cotton batting or whatever, and then you can kind of tie it off and use the rest of the sock to make the 8 legs of the socktopus. There are a ton of plush toys that you can make with socks, particularly if you have those super fuzzy socks. I also saw Barbie clothes made out of socks. That's a cute craft to do with a child that's maybe just about interested in learning how to use a sewing machine, but they might not be quite there. There are just tons of YouTube videos of how to do that. There is a popular craft that, again, there's quite a few videos where you make a donut out of a sock. So this would be like a toy donut that you would play with, but they take brown or beige or white donuts, so the colors of chocolate and vanilla and caramel and butterscotch and stuff, and they roll up the socks so it basically makes the donut shape, and then they use felt to simulate the icing, and then they use little beads to make the sprinkles. So super yummy looking. And then there was an activity I saw that would be really fun in the summer where you take what's called a rainbow bubble snake, where you take a plastic bottle and you cut off the bottom of it, and the plastic bottles that work best are the ones that have this kind of like a little spout part on the top that you pull out to make the water come out. So not a screw off cap, but sort of this pop top. And you cut off the bottom, you put a sock over the bottom with duct tape, and then inside you put soapy water and with some food coloring, maybe some glycerin, and then you blow through that pop top piece, and out of the bottom through the sock comes super fluffy bubble arches that are very colorful. And if you sort of put them on the lawn like little arches, they look like rainbows. To finish off today's podcast, I want to share a story about creative use of socks. So I used to organize these green lifestyle tours for an organization called the Family Nature Summits. This is a great summer activity for families. It's like a summer camp where the kids go off and do one thing and the adults do something else. So I used to organize something called green tours. These summits occur in a different place every year, and I would research that place and I would look for any green innovators near that place. And then I would bring a bunch of people to visit them in their homes or their businesses or their studios. So in 2009, I organized a tour near Glens Falls, New York, which is about an hour north of Albany. And we were visiting, one of the stops on the tour was a weaving studio that was run by Hillary Cooper Kenny, and her studio was called Crazy as a Loom. And she wove just many, many types of recycled fiber. But one of her most popular designs at that time were rugs that were made from old socks. So she had worked out an arrangement with a sock factory for a brand called Soulmates. They already have a cool product where they sell unmatched socks, which reduces the amount of socks that you have that don't have a partner. But anyway, they are super colorful. So what she would do is she arranged for local artisans to cut the socks into loops and then loop them into chains, and then she would weave them into rugs. Now, she doesn't offer those kinds of rugs anymore, but I have taken her example and I have woven old socks into loomed rugs, and they're just great. I mean, sock loops are fantastic for making rugs because they're kind of thick and they can be colorful and they just make a rug quite quickly. So one more note, when you have realized you are going to toss a bunch of your socks and it's time to go get a bunch of new socks, you may not know this, but socks are often the item that homeless shelters need the most. So when you buy a new pack of socks for yourself, perhaps buy one more and donate it to your local homeless shelter. That's a good deed of the day kind of thing you could do. So until next time, may you see your trash as another source of art and maybe some toy sloths as well.